Welcome to this week's episode of Kids Church Online. Whoop, 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 whoop. I am so excited and pleased that you've checked into this week's episode of Kids Church. We're continuing our series looking at Old Testament characters, and this week we're looking at somebody really special. His name was Joseph.
Stories of the Bible. Joseph forgives. This is Joseph, who was the son of Israel and Rachel. But he had 11 brothers who hated him and sold him into slavery. After being put in jail, Joseph told of the future of Egypt when he interpreted Pharaoh's dreams, and Joseph found favor with the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh made Joseph a leader in his kingdom. Just as Joseph had told the Pharaoh, Egypt had 7 years of abundance. Then the 7 years of abundance came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. But the Egyptians had food to eat because Joseph had planned for the famine. There was famine in all the other lands, and many came to Joseph to buy food. There was even a famine in the land that Joseph came from. So when Israel heard that there was grain in Egypt, he sent his sons to buy some. But Israel did not send Benjamin with the others because he was afraid that harm might come to him. When Joseph's brothers came to him, Joseph recognized them, but he pretended to be a stranger. So Joseph decided to test his brothers. He had his interpreter tell them to send for Benjamin, who had stayed home. And then he threw his brothers in jail for 3 days. On the 3rd day, Joseph let all but one of the brothers take grain to their starving households with the instruction to bring Benjamin back. But Joseph provided for his brothers' journey and gave them grain and silver. The brothers did exactly as Joseph instructed, as they were scared that God was punishing them for what they had done to Joseph so many years before. They traveled home to their father's house, then back to Egypt. Now that he had seen that they brought Benjamin, Joseph was overwhelmed, so he released the brother who was still in prison. But Joseph decided to play one more trick on his brothers. He sent the brothers away but told his servant to hide his silver cup in Benjamin's bag. Then Joseph told the servant to go after the brothers and retrieve the cup. The brothers hadn't traveled far before the servant stopped them and accused them of stealing the cup. Joseph could no longer control himself before his attendants. He made them leave so he could be alone with his brothers, and he told his brothers who he really was.
Ta-da!
He told them of his life and all he had experienced, and he forgave them for what they had done. God was with Joseph and took care of him and showed him favor.
Stories of the Bible. Joseph and his coat.
So this is Joseph.
Hey!
You see, Joseph was the son of Israel and Rachel. Israel loved Joseph more than all 12 of his sons. In fact, he made Joseph a coat to show him how much he loved him. When Joseph's brothers saw this, they hated Joseph. One night, Joseph had a dream. When he awoke, Joseph told the dream to his brothers. He said, "Listen to this dream I had. We were gathering grain when suddenly my bundle of grain rose up and all of you bowed to me." This made his brothers hate Joseph even more. And they said, "You're gonna rule over us?" Then Joseph had another dream. And he told it to his brothers and his father. He said, "Listen, I had another dream. And this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." This time Israel heard the dream and rebuked Joseph, saying, "Will your mother and brothers and I actually come and bow down before you?" The brothers were even more angry when they heard the second dream. Israel, however, decided to think about what Joseph was saying. One day, Joseph's brothers were working when they saw Joseph coming to meet them. One of his brothers mocked him and said, "Here comes the dreamer. Come on now, let's kill him and throw him away to be devoured by a ferocious animal. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." One of the brothers named Reuben wanted to rescue Joseph, so he said, "Let us not take his life. Instead, throw him in the pit."
Yeah!
So when Joseph came to his brothers,
Hey!
they attacked him. They took the robe their father had given Joseph. They hoisted Joseph up and threw him into the well. Then they saw a group of men from Midian coming towards them. Judah thought it would be a good idea to sell Joseph to these men. So the brothers sold Joseph to the merchants for 20 shekels. The brothers then took the coat of many colors back to their father and made him believe that Joseph had been killed. Israel wept for his son whom he loved. Meanwhile, Joseph was taken as a slave to Egypt to work in the house of a man named Potiphar. For Joseph's story was only just beginning.
Stories of the Bible. Joseph and the Promised Land.
This is Joseph,
Hey!
who's the son of Israel and Rachel. Joseph was the most loved of all his brothers, so his brothers hated him. After being sold into slavery and put in jail, Joseph found favor with the Pharaoh and ruled over all of Egypt. He helped Egypt thrive during 7 years of abundance, and then he was prepared for 7 years of famine because God had helped Joseph to understand the Pharaoh's dreams about what would happen to Egypt. Now during this time, Joseph's brothers came to seek his help, and after testing them, Joseph told them who he was, and he forgave his brothers for all the trouble they had put him through. But Joseph had not seen his father for many years.
Hey!
So he sent for Israel and his brothers' families. Together they all traveled to the land of Egypt, where Joseph would provide for them in the famine. Pharaoh allowed Joseph and all his brothers to settle in one of the best parts of Egypt. And finally, Joseph was reunited with his father. Joseph lived 110 years and saw 3 generations of his family flourish in the land. Before Joseph died, he told his brothers of the future of Egypt. He told them of the exodus that would take place, meaning that they would all return to the promised land of their father Israel, his father Isaac, and his father Abraham. He made his brothers promise that when they left the land of Egypt, they would take his bones with them and bury them in the promised land. Joseph always lived with hope that God would deliver him and his people. Though many people meant to show him harm throughout his life, God meant it all for good, so that many people should live because of his faith.
Now, what we find in the story of Joseph, he had some brothers, and they were pretty jealous of him. In fact, they sold Joseph into slavery. That is crazy! Their own brothers decided to sell him to go away from them to slaves. And do you know what? His own brothers betrayed him. That would have been really hard. That would have felt like it was really hurtful for him. He was let down by his own family. Sometimes people can let us down too. Maybe you felt like you've been let down by friends or even family. Well, do you know what? God says in the Bible that we can be struck down, but we're not destroyed. In fact, God sometimes knows that we go through challenges, and He wants to remind us that we're not finished. He can still use us today. We can be struck down but not destroyed. We can be hit down by other people, rejected. We can be let down on so many different times and so many different occasions. But God is still wanting to use us. He's still got great plans for us. And do you know what? God is looking to do something special for you and me today. Now, if Joseph didn't have it hard enough being sold and let down by his own brothers, he then ends up in prison. He's in prison for roughly about 17 years. What? So not only was he let down, but he would have felt like he was left behind. Sometimes we can feel that we're like left behind and left out by others. Maybe friends that we thought that we had at school, or maybe people we feel like we've been left out. Do you know what God says to us? He makes a promise and says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. That means that God's never going to leave you behind. He's always with us. He makes a promise. I'll never leave you. I'm never going to forsake you. How cool is that? Now get this, okay? Joseph gone through so much heartache and pain throughout his lifetime. But then he gets this moment where he's about to meet his brothers again in the story. And we find that Joseph has to meet his brothers and face up to them. And you know, how would he forgive his own brothers that let him down so many years in the past, where he had such a hard life and is now in this position of power? Maybe he should take revenge and get them back. But what we find in the story, what we see in the Bible, is this really special verse that says, Joseph looked at his brothers and says, what you intended to harm, God intended for good. What you intended to harm me, God intended it for good. That means that He's able to make all things work together for the good of those who love Him. That's an incredible promise. That as hard as life can be, God can still turn it around. God is able to make all things work for the good of those who love Him. What an amazing Bible verse to hold on to. He is so special that He's able to take hard, difficult things that come against us and turn them and bring transformation and bring change that is for our good, our benefit. That's who God is. What an amazing God.
One, two, 2.5, 2 3/4.
There once was a woman named Ruth who lived in a land called Moab. Ruth married into the family of a woman named Naomi. But all of the men in Naomi's family died, and Ruth was left without a husband. One day, Naomi decided to go back to her homeland of Israel, and Ruth decided to go with her. On their journey, Naomi said to Ruth, "Go back to your mother's home. May the Lord bless you." But Ruth was determined to go on with Naomi, and Ruth said, "Don't ask me to leave you. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Through love and kindness, Ruth would not give up on Naomi. God had a plan for Ruth and guided her along the way. The Lord provided Ruth with a job working in a field, and Ruth never gave up. Ruth followed her heart, and in doing so, God rewarded her faithfulness. She married a godly man, and Ruth's son would carry out God's plan to bring Jesus to this earth.
Ruth was the daughter-in-law of Naomi. Both of their husbands died, and Naomi said Ruth did not have to stay with her anymore. But Ruth told Naomi, "Don't ask me to leave. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your friends will be my friends, and your God will be my God." So Ruth and Naomi went to Bethlehem together. It was a good thing Ruth went with Naomi because Bethlehem was very far away, and Naomi could not have traveled all that way by herself. Ruth never complained but was a good friend to Naomi. She just wanted to help her. When they got there, Ruth decided she should do some kind of work. It was harvest time, so she worked in the fields. A man named Boaz owned the field. Boaz came by to greet the workers and notice Ruth. He saw her kindness to Naomi and said to her, "Don't go work in any other field, but stay here with the others. I will make sure you are safe and have food and water. I know what you have done for Naomi." Boaz even gave Ruth extra food. She took it home and shared it with Naomi.
God's story, Ruth. So part of God's story is about a woman named Ruth, and it begins like this. Ruth lived in a place called Moab and was married to a guy who was part of God's special family, the Israelites. A few years later, though, Ruth's husband died. Instead of returning to her family, which would have been expected, she stayed with Naomi, her husband's mom. Naomi tried to get Ruth to go back to her family in Moab, but Ruth wouldn't leave Naomi, no matter what. In fact, she wanted to go back to Israel with her. Ruth said, "Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God." So they both returned to Naomi's home in Bethlehem. Back then, though, it was hard for women to find work. Usually, they had to be taken care of by their husband or a dad. It's really hard to imagine that now, but Naomi and Ruth might not have even known how they'd survive. At first, to get food, Ruth went to the fields of a man named Boaz and followed his harvesters around. If they dropped anything, even just a piece of grain, she picked it up. This was called gleaning. Ruth worked from morning to night and barely even took a break. Boaz noticed. He told his workers to leave behind some extra grain for her to gather. When Naomi heard about this, she was overjoyed because Boaz was Naomi's relative and what's called a family redeemer. That meant that it was his responsibility to take care of his family. If anybody was going to rescue Ruth and Naomi, it was Boaz. Kids, we have a redeemer too. It's Jesus. He's the one who saves us. Anyway, this gave Naomi an idea. She told Ruth to put on her best clothes and perfume and then go to the place where Boaz was sleeping. Naomi said that once Boaz had gone to sleep, Ruth should lay down by his feet. Now, this may sound like a weird plan, but it was actually really brave. Ruth trusted Naomi and obeyed. When Boaz woke up, he was surprised. After all, someone was lying at his feet. That's not exactly a normal night. When Boaz asked who Ruth was, she said, "I am your servant. You are my family redeemer." Now Boaz understood. Ruth wanted Boaz to marry her so that she and Naomi would both be taken care of. Boaz agreed. This was a huge deal. Ruth wasn't an Israelite, but she wanted to follow God anyway. By marrying Boaz, she got to officially be part of God's family. In fact, Ruth's great-grandson was King David, and many, many years later, Jesus, the rescuer, was born into the same family line. Now, because of Jesus, we get to be a part of God's family too. So, in case you missed it, here's the quick version. Ruth was from Moab. Her husband died. Ruth was left with his mom, Naomi. Naomi told her to go home. Ruth said no. She went to Israel with Naomi. They needed someone to take care of them. Ruth gleaned in a field. Boaz noticed. He left extra grain for Ruth. Naomi made a plan. Ruth obeyed it. She wanted to marry Boaz. He agreed. Ruth became part of God's special family. and we can too.
Now, in the story of Ruth, there are 3 really important characters. Character number 1 is Ruth. You guessed it. Character number 2 is a girl called Naomi, and she befriends Ruth. In fact, they're like a little team working together to try and do good and be good. And then the character number 4 is Boaz, okay? What a crazy name. I'm going to name my child Boaz. Boaz is an incredible character. He chooses to show love and kindness to Ruth, even though it would have been in the time a little bit mental, a little bit crazy, a little bit unheard of. And yet Boaz goes out of his way, you could say, to show kindness and love to Ruth. He displays a picture of what God's love is towards you and me. God always shows us love. He always shows us kindness. In fact, the Bible says that he's slow to anger and abounding in love. That's what the kindness of God is like. He has adopted you and me into his family. We're chosen sons and daughters. Not just of that guy called Boaz in the Old Testament, but we're chosen sons and daughters of God, the living God, because of what Jesus has done. How special is that? Now, in the story, it's really important to know that Ruth was an outsider, and Boaz chose to show kindness and love to Ruth. He ended up marrying Ruth. They had a son called Obed. Okay, off to bed. No, his name was Obed, and he was David, King David's granddad. So he's a really special character in the Bible as well. Now, what's really important to know is that we too, just like Boaz showed Ruth love and kindness as an outsider, we too are called to show love and kindness to the outsiders, to people that maybe are pushed out, feeling a bit lonely and isolated. We're called to love them and to show kindness towards them, just as God has showed kindness towards you and me. We've been adopted into God's family, and so what that means is that we get to show love and kindness to those around us, particularly to the ones that are hurting and the ones that are maybe pushed out by everyone else. We're called to go and love those ones, to go and be kind towards those ones. How special is that? Now, another really special, important thing to know in the story of Ruth is that Boaz, before he can marry Ruth, he actually has to pay a price. Back in the time, they had to pay money in order to make sure that they could move things forward in marriage. And Boaz, he has to go and pay a high price for Ruth. Now, that was unheard of at the time, but Boaz still paid a great price, because he loved her. He wanted to be married to her, in a relationship with her. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's a bit like a beautiful love story. Well, guess what? God has paid the price for you and for me. He's not just paid the price in terms of money and coin, but he's paid the price through Jesus Christ, who died on the cross for your sin and for my sin, for all of our shame, all of our wrongdoing. He went and chose to pay the ultimate sacrifice out of love for you and for me. How incredible is that?
Jesus, I'm thankful for all you've done. Jesus, I'm thankful for all you do. Jesus, I'm thankful for all you have done. Jesus, I'm thankful for all you do. Here in your presence, I find all I need. You got me dancing in everything. My heart is singing, for you give me life. I long to praise you, I'm lifting you high. Jesus, I'm thankful for all you've done. Jesus, I'm thankful for all you do. praising you. Jesus, I'm thankful for all you've done. Jesus, I'm thankful for all you do. 'Cause I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful for you. God, I'll praise you in everything that I do. I'm so thankful for you. Because of who you are, my heart will give you praise. For everything you've done, my heart will celebrate. Because of who you are, my heart will give you praise. For everything you've done, my heart will celebrate. Hey! I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful for you. God, I'll praise you in everything that I do. Because of who you are, my heart will give you praise. For everything you've done, my heart will celebrate. I'm so thankful for you.
Now, we are going to pray together right now, and we're going to thank God that He's shown us love and kindness, that He's paid for us the ultimate price. Come on, let's thank Him right now. Dear God, we thank you so much that you've chosen to love us, that you've chosen to show kindness towards us, and that you have paid the ultimate price, and because of that, we're adopted into your family. We thank you for Jesus. We thank you for all of these amazing things, all that we've been learning in Kids Church today. Amen. Amazing! I hope that you've had as much fun as we have in Kids Church today. We look forward to seeing you next time. Have an awesome week. See you later. Bye!